Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure and privilege to welcome you all for this distinguished lecture series on energy efficiency for this month of November 2020. As we all know, as a part of our outreach activities to bring in the best of thought leaders, technologists, and specialists on energy efficiency to the wider audience in India, we have started this series, distinguished lecture series on energy efficiency. This takes place on every Monday, first Monday of every month, between 4 and 5. The distinguished speaker talks for about half an hour, followed by question and answer from the delegates. And we are privileged to have Mr. Brian Motherway, head of energy efficiency at International Energy Agency, to be here with us to talk to us and to deliver this distinguished lecture series. As I said, he is the head of energy efficiency at IEA and oversees a wide range of analytical and outreach activities programs of IEA nationally and internationally. Prior to joining IEA, Mr. Motherway was the chief executive of the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And a very unique person. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering with a doctorate in sociology, with a PhD in sociology. He has been involved extensively in several activities with regard to energy efficiency globally, and he has contributed immensely through various programs, both nationally and internationally. And we have had the privilege of Bureau of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, and several of our Indian policy makers who have had the benefit of discussing with Mr. Motherway and also listening to some of his guidance and advice. Two of the important aspects of which Mr. Motherway has contributed in the recent times, I thought I'll share with the audience before I leave the stage to Mr. Motherway. IEA has recently come out with a sustainable recovery plan, in which Mr. Motherway has authored an integrated approach on how energy efficiency can contribute to economic recovery and also create more number of jobs. One of the statements he makes is energy efficiency is a job creator while sustainably recovering the economy. The other important contribution, which I thought interesting contribution of Mr. Motherway in the recent times, exactly 1 year ago, Mr. Motherway wrote an article on how user choice and behavior of users needs to be understood so that energy efficiency could be scaled up faster and more effectively. Maybe the socialist in Motherway was getting reflected in this article. We have the privilege of a thought leader in energy efficiency from IEA talking to us. Thank you, Mr. Motherway, for being here with us. And now the stage is yours for the lecture, please. Mr. Motherway.
Thank you very much, Venkatagiri. It's a great pleasure to be here. And as you said in your remarks, we really value the relationship between the IEA and India, particularly on the topic of energy efficiency. So I'm very pleased and honored to have been invited to give this lecture today. And I hope what I have to say will be of interest to all of the colleagues. And I also want to note particularly that I know you are joining me from a zero energy building in Hyderabad. And so commendations for your leadership in terms of the work of the CAI, both in the work it does and obviously in the building you're in today. So it's a great pleasure to be here and I look forward to the discussion. I'm just going to share my slides now so I can show you some remarks I hope to make. I just see if you can, that's okay now? You can see my slides, good. So I really want to talk to you today about...
Brian, sorry, we see it in the presenters mode. If you could hide the presenters window.
Is that correct now, Kieran?
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. So I want to share with you today some of our analysis on energy efficiency, particularly for the industrial sector, but also particularly for today's circumstances and the world we all find ourselves living in, none of which we expected to find ourselves in even just a year ago. And in particular, all over the world, there are still various degrees of containment or confinement or lockdown to address the very serious issues we face as a global society around our health and well-being because of COVID-19. And of course, health has been a priority in all of these issues for governments and society as a whole, as is entirely correct. But these issues that we face and the way we have tackled them and will continue to tackle them have many energy and environmental implications. And that's what I want to talk about today. Here in France, we have just re-entered a more serious phase of lockdown. So I'm talking to you from my home today, whereas just a week ago, I would have been talking to you from my office. And many other countries are in similar situations. And that, of course, means everything from personal transport to our commercial sectors to our hospitality sectors are very severely affected by the current circumstances and all of the energy implications that implies. So let me talk about what that means, first of all, for greenhouse gas emissions and what it may mean for the future. In particular, let's look at greenhouse gas emissions associated with the energy sector over the last couple of decades. First of all, the last time we had a crisis such as this, if it is even comparable, is the global financial crisis of 2009, where we saw, for the first time in a very long time, global CO2 emissions associated with energy actually fell in the year 2009. But straight away, because of economic stimulus, because of the return to strong economic growth, emissions grew very quickly, and we went back towards the unsustainable path of higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this year, we will see historic falls in greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy, but not for reasons that we can celebrate. This is because people's freedom has been curtailed, people have fallen sick, and unfortunately people have died, people's mobility has been restricted. So none of these are good reasons or good means to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the question is, what happens next? And the answer to that question is up to us. We have a choice. If we get the policies and the actions wrong after this crisis, we will see a return to the growth of emissions in greenhouse gases that we have seen over recent decades. But if we get the policies right, we could see a permanent and sustainable fall in greenhouse gas emissions if we properly align our responses to the current crisis with our clean energy, our decarbonisation and our energy efficiency goals. So in the IEA, we talk about this in the context of a sustainable recovery to come after the COVID-19 crisis. And we investigate a scenario where policies are aligned that will boost the economy, create jobs quickly, but also bring benefits in terms of improving the resilience and sustainability of our energy systems and put us on a permanent downward path of CO2 emissions. Now, this involves investment in a lot of different sectors, but notably we can see here that probably, in fact, definitely the biggest sector of investment of the IEA Sustainable Recovery Plan is energy efficiency. We see investment in energy efficiency in buildings, in vehicles, and of course in industry. And it's not particularly surprising that energy efficiency shows up to be the top of the list in our Sustainable Recovery Plan. And the reason is it is a job-creating machine. Energy efficiency is jobs intensive. When you imagine people retrofitting existing buildings, building new buildings, upgrading infrastructure, upgrading industrial facilities, all of these activities are labor intensive. Not only that, but they tend to employ local labor in sectors such as like construction, retail and manufacturing, and also they can generate those jobs quickly. You can imagine that certain sectors of clean energy with policies today, economic activity and job creation might take a couple of years to mature, but that's not generally the case, relatively speaking, with energy efficiency, where we can see economic activity ramp up quite quickly if the right policies are put in place by government. Now, if we look at this sort of specific case of India, and you take the recommendations of the Sustainable Recovery Plan that the IEA published during the summer, by our estimate, and this is a broad estimate, aligning economic stimulus with clean energy could create over 350,000 jobs in India for each year for the next 3 years. And you can see from this chart that more than half of the total jobs and more than half of the total activity comes in energy efficiency. It comes in buildings and it comes in appliances, pumps, cook stoves, and other key energy using activities. And I should note, and I will say this more than once, India is already a leader in many areas of energy efficiency, including the sectors I've just mentioned. the work that India is doing on building codes that are being rolled out in different states as well as nationally, the work we see going on, India's famous progress on energy efficiency in areas such as lighting, pumping, air conditioning, all of this sets the scene for an understanding of what is possible. Energy efficiency is unique really across the energy field because it aligns so well with not just energy goals and not just environment goals, but also economic and social well-being goals. Because when buildings are built more efficiently, when energy efficient lighting is rolled out, then citizens across the country, their daily lives are being improved. It's easier to keep them cool in hot conditions. Lighting is better. It's cheaper to run. It's better quality. People are able to afford to use their appliances more. Electricity is available to more because the demand is not so high. This is as well as the macro benefits in terms of reducing energy imports, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing air pollution in cities. Energy efficiency has a lot of points that sell it very well in terms of the way it can bring benefits to people's lives, socially, in terms of health, environment, and economy. And in particular, in these times of recovery from the current crisis, it can really well align economic stimulus imperatives with clean energy and longer-term clean energy transition goals. So it's in a unique position to play an important role to align economic goals with environment goals, particularly during the current crisis. Having said that, 2020 does not bring much good news for the energy sector as a whole, and certainly not for energy efficiency. We see across all parts of the energy system a decline in investment taking place in 2020. Of course, this is not a surprise. Activity is halted in many ways. Demand for certain energy products, particularly oil products, has plummeted. Consumer confidence has fallen. Investor confidence has fallen. So it's hardly surprising that total levels of investment are down. But this fall in investment has many implications. I won't dwell on some of the ones related to the supply side, but I'll talk about energy efficiency and energy demand. Energy efficiency needs two things to make it work. It needs good policy and it needs investment. And in the last couple of years, the IEA in its global tracking has seen a slowdown in both of these things. And that's a concern to us because we see tremendous opportunity for greater levels of energy efficiency globally to bring all of the benefits I speak about to people's lives and to societies as a whole. But they need that policy action and they need that level of investment, which we're not seeing at the moment. So here in 2020, people are spending less on building new efficient buildings, they're spending less on upgrading existing buildings, they're spending less on more efficient appliances and vehicles. All, as I state and I emphasize, all of these factors, all of these behaviors are very understandable in the world we live in today, but they do have implications for the energy efficiency system of the future. I want to stress, while I've been talking about the short-term benefits of energy efficiency, that we look at this in the medium and long term as well. In particular, if you look at the period over the next 2 decades, between now and 2040, and we examine all of the opportunities to make our energy systems and the worlds around us more energy efficient, we could literally double global energy efficiency in the next 2 decades, which means we could extract twice as much value from every unit of energy that we use. And that's worth dwelling on for us to think about every time we use energy to light our home, to travel around our cities or our rural areas. Imagine if you were able to do twice as much with the same amount of energy. It would mean that your spending on energy would fall dramatically. It would mean that industries using energy would become more cost competitive and more sustainable. And of course, but particularly for many parts of the world, including both where I am in Europe and in India, that import a lot of their energy, their import bills could drop dramatically, their dependence on other people's energy could drop dramatically, and their ability to retain that wealth and that money in the economy would be greatly enhanced. So we have great potential for growing energy efficiency globally over the next couple of decades, even just using the technologies that we already know. This is about deploying more efficient building materials such as insulation, better windows, better heating systems, better cooling systems, more efficient motors in industry, more efficient vehicles on the road. All of these technologies already exist to make our world much more energy efficient. And I will talk later about some of the actions we might take that would make that possible. In particular, I stress the alignment between energy and environment goals and economic goals, particularly in the context of economic stimulus. So many countries in the world now are examining opportunities to stimulate their economies. Sometimes this involves large amounts of state-led capital investment. Sometimes it is about incentives or new regulations, new subsidies, new tax schemes, anything that might help encourage the economy to return to activity and to return to growth. And if that's done in an efficient way, there's a great opportunity to align goals such as job creation, a focus on domestic manufacture, building of high-value service sectors, upskilling of jobs, with environment goals such as reducing air pollution in cities and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What I would also stress is the risk of not making that alignment, because it is not just an opportunity lost in itself, but keep in mind, as I showed you earlier, after the last financial crisis of 2009, when economic activity returned, so did more intensive energy use and therefore higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions. And the same thing is at risk of happening again, because as soon as economies start to recover, which of course we all hope will be very soon, we will see higher levels of consumer confidence. We will see investors starting to invest again, and they will be investing in equipment, appliances, and infrastructure that all have energy using implications. So there's a choice between making them inefficient and making them inefficient or making them efficient. And keep in mind that every building we build now will be with us for some decades. If we build it inefficiently, then we are locking in wasteful energy use, we are locking in higher energy bills, we are locking in lower levels of resilience, we are locking in higher levels of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Alternatively, if we build a building like the one that Venkatagiri is in today, then we are locking in resilience and independence. We are locking in more comfortable buildings, lower energy bills, lower levels of emissions. So every action we take, particularly in the context of accelerated levels of investment in economic activity after the current crisis, turns us in either one direction or another, towards a more resilient, more efficient, more comfortable energy system, or the opposite to that. And that's why the choices of all of us as consumers, as business people, as members of society, and particularly in the policy realm, that's why decisions coming up in the next months and years will be really important for determining the future of all of our energy systems together. Now, let me turn for a minute to a bit more discussion, particularly on the industrial sector. So first of all, let me look from a global perspective. One thing I want to stress in highlighting the importance of the industrial sector is that debates about clean energy and renewable energy and even energy efficiency tend to focus on the power sector. And we see in India, for example, massive progress and really successful progress, not just in energy access for electricity, but also in the growth of solar energy, wind energy, and progress towards cleaning power generation systems for the future. The IEA recently published some new analysis that shows that in the next decades, solar will be what we call the king in power generation. It's already the cheapest source of electricity in many markets. That will continue to be the case and even strengthen. And therefore, we expect solar energy to grow very rapidly. We also expect wind power to grow. And in fact, we're seeing a resurgence now in interest in offshore wind in many parts of the world. And we know that India has some great potential here as well. So while a lot of the debate has focused on the power generation sector and a lot of progress has been made, sometimes we see less discussion on other sectors, such as buildings, such as transport, and what I want to focus on today on the industrial sector, where a lot of energy use and therefore greenhouse gas emissions are not directly associated with electricity necessarily, and are also harder to tackle because they're involved in maybe high energy, heat intensive industrial processes, large energy intensive chemical processes, things that are not easy to shift towards more efficient or cleaner models. And that's why it's very important that these sectors get the attention they need as part of our overall effort to make our economies more efficient and more based on clean energy. Now, how are we doing? In all of the main sectors of industry, we can see that energy intensity is improving, by which I mean we are becoming more energy efficient. Over the last couple of decades, you can see that in all sectors, we have managed to extract more economic value from each energy unit that we use. You can see that's particularly strong in the cement sector, and of course, India is a world leader in cement and in efficient cement production. We see it less strongly in sectors such as iron and steel, but all sectors have made some progress. But if we look at what we in the IEA call the efficient world scenario, which is where we could go in the next 20 years, we could see that all sectors could improve much further. We could see that energy efficiency improvements, even just using technologies that we know of are available today, we could drive much greater levels of efficiency in all industrial subsectors. And that means costs would be lowered, environmental impacts would be lowered, and these sectors would be more resilient and more competitive. Certain sectors matter more than others because of their scale, of course, and these sectors are often the strongest focus of technology innovation and policy attention. But it's also worth remembering that while we focus on some of the big sectors like iron and steel, cement, aluminium, there's a very large tail of smaller, less intensive industrial sites that actually make up the majority of savings potential. So it's important that as policymakers and as the industrial sector actors more generally, we don't only concentrate on the very big, the most energy intensive, the highest energy users. We also look at the larger number of smaller, less intensive energy users that all add up to be a very significant proportion. Now, let me focus just a little bit on one important sector, which is iron and steel, where we have seen some, but not a huge amount of progress in the last couple of decades, but where we see there could be very considerable more potential in the coming decades. And this is particularly important because iron and steel in energy, both in energy use and any energy savings potential terms, is one of the biggest sectors in the world. What's important to note here is that when we talk about making iron and steel more efficient, but also more sustainable, we need to think beyond energy in itself. And you can see in this graph that in the next couple of years, certainly in the next decade or two, what are really crucial is not just energy efficiency, which is represented here called technology performance. So that's more efficient operations, more efficient motors, more efficient heating and cooling, but also material efficiency. This is becoming much more important and will become much more important in the coming decades, that we look at material efficiency. That means in many sectors, recycling the raw materials. It means better use, lower levels of waste, as well as deploying new technologies such as hydrogen, other fuels such as bioenergy, greater use of electrification, and in the longer term as well, carbon capture, utilization and storage, which will be an essential ingredient if we are to get tough sectors like an iron and steel on a more sustainable path over the coming decades. So we need to think beyond just energy efficiency, but energy efficiency remains a key component. In particular, if you look at iron and steel across the whole supply chain from manufacture to usage, keep in mind that a lot of the gains in iron and steel will come from not just how efficiently it is manufactured, but also how efficiently it is utilized and deployed. So we can see lower demand for steel, for instance, in vehicles, if vehicles are more lightweighted or redesigned with that in mind. We can see the same in buildings, where extended lifetime will make a big difference to steel demand, improved design and construction, as well as in manufacturing itself, where we'll see very significant potential gains, both in terms of energy efficiency and material efficiency. So, given the extent of the challenge to lower the carbon emissions and improve the sustainability of key sectors like iron and steel, I stress that all of these dimensions are necessary. It's not just one action, one technology, or one policy that will get us on the right path, but a whole range of concerted actions put together that will be necessary. Another important dimension of industry, and particularly intensive industry, is we tend to focus on what we build next. We say, how can we make the next iron and steel plant more efficient? How can we make the next cement plant more sustainable? But keep in mind that there is an awful lot of existing infrastructure and assets in the world today that will be with us for quite some time. And particularly if we look at iron and steel, we see a particular band of blast furnaces in China built in the last 10 to 15 years that will be with us for some decades yet. And at the moment are not particularly efficient, not particularly low emitters, and will need to be considered in terms of refits, refurbishments, upgrades, maybe even in some cases retirements. So we can't entirely focus on what we're going to build for the future. We also have to keep in mind the set of assets we have across many sectors that are already influencing our global energy efficiency levels, our global energy demand, our global emissions, and considering what is already in existence is an important part of our future strategies, as well as focusing on technology innovation, on better energy management in industry, and all of the forward-looking practices that will certainly be part of the mix as well. Let me turn for a minute to some of the specifics of the industry case in India. First of all, I said already, India is a global leader in energy efficiency. There's no doubt about this. In many sectors, the progress India has been making across its whole economy in terms of becoming more efficient in its energy use are quite striking. And you can see here, in fact, that in 2019, India was really at the top of the league in terms of the progress it made across the economy in energy efficiency. This is driven by many issues, but particularly some really great policies in India, such as perform, achieve, and trade in the industry sector, some of the work done by EESL in appliances, the great work done by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in standards and labeling, and many other actions. So there's a whole range of actions across the whole economy. And remember that this is benefiting every Indian citizen. It's making access more affordable, it's bringing down dependence on imports, it's reducing air pollution in cities, it's reducing global greenhouse gas emissions from India. So there are many benefits that India is gaining from this efficiency progress. But of course, more can be done. Like in every part of the world, efficiency could be going faster, and there are opportunities for stronger policies and stronger actions across all sectors in the coming years and decades. Industry contributes a large share of India's energy use, and it has been growing in recent years. And you can see that about 40% of total energy use in India comes from the industrial energy sector. And some key sectors include iron and steel, which I've talked about, as well as some larger sectors, but also many smaller sectors. So this is benefiting India in terms of economic activity and job creation, and also developing a more indigenous manufacturing sector, but of course has implications for energy demand, emissions, and all that goes with that. So we see that energy consumption and CO2 emissions have been growing rapidly in many sectors in India in the last couple of decades. We see very dramatic growth in some sectors, such as iron and steel, which I've talked about, but also in other sectors across the economy. This is in line with GDP growth. It means India has a fast-growing and successful economy. This is bringing many benefits, but it's also, of course, increasing energy demand, increasing CO2 emissions. And that's why the kind of policies I've been talking about today will be very important for the coming years, not just for India, but for globally. And we expect India to remain a key player in global steel production for many decades. We expect it to be growing its own share, but also its overall place in the world league table in terms of steel production. And that's why I've chosen to highlight today the opportunities for greater levels of efficiency, by which I mean not just energy efficiency, but also material efficiency, and therefore what I can call the overall economic efficiency of India's steel sector. Opportunities to create more for lower energy inputs, for lower material costs, therefore making the sector more resilient, more competitive, and more sustainable. And this is how we see many sectors growing, particularly in growing economies such as India, where there are opportunities to lock in newer, more efficient, cleaner technologies as part of the growth of sectors like iron and steel, as well as other industrial sectors that will be key to the global story of the future. India will be a powerhouse not just for itself, but for the region and for the globe in terms of its impact economically and environmentally. And therefore, certainly, I am very pleased to see the strong focus that energy efficiency gets in Indian policy making. And I can tell you that many countries around the world are looking at India's examples and looking at India's leadership in terms of the success it has made in energy efficiency as well as in other relevant policy domains in recent years. Before I close, I'd like to say a few words about the IEA and our work with India and our work more globally. And this is really to reach out to everybody today and say, the IEA is a willing partner to you all. We want to engage with you. We want to collaborate. We want to learn from the success and progress in India. We want to bring to bear learnings from other countries. And we want to bring to bear the knowledge and data that the IEA has so that policymaking across the world benefits from that knowledge and experience. So let me just talk a little bit about our work in that regard for a few minutes. First of all, please visit our website, which is iea.org, and you will see a number of publications that I think will be of interest to you, not least, of course, a major energy policy review that we were invited to collaborate with our Indian colleagues on in recent months, and it was published earlier this year, India 2020 Energy Policy Review, that highlighted many of the great success stories across Indian energy policy making in recent years, as well as identifying some of the opportunities for the next phase. There are also some specific publications you might want to look at from which I have drawn today, such as our work on iron and steel and other industrial sectors, which I think you'll find very interesting. I want to mention one particular project that we are working on at the moment that we'd be very happy to engage with you more on, which is we are looking with some of our Indian partners and friends across government and beyond on the textile sector, which is particularly, of course, important for India. It's a large sector. It is a strong employer. And of course, it's particularly a strong employer of women, which is very important. And it, of course, it's a significant energy user. So we are enjoying a collaboration with our Indian colleagues to look at this sector in more detail, to see the kinds of technologies, energy management practices, and policies that can help see the textile sector thrive for many years to come in ways that are more energy efficient and therefore lower costs, more competitive and more sustainable. And it's a good example of a sector that up to date has not been so focused in terms of policies such as the PAT scheme, but I think will be increasingly important in terms of its contribution because it's already so important economically and socially. And therefore, if it can become more energy efficiency, that will only bring many benefits across society. I also want to highlight there's a number of publications available on our website that look at different sectors, including isolating energy efficiency itself, material efficiency, but also different industrial sectors and different aspects. And I think you'll find these resources useful in your deliberations, particularly in these times. And finally, I want to let you know that we have some free training resources available as well on our website, particularly in the area of energy efficiency. So there are a number of online courses available on our website. The address is on the screen now. These are self-taught, step-by-step structured training courses. You can sign up for them. There is no fee, there is no obligation, and you can take these courses at your own pace to learn more about energy efficiency, data and indicators and statistics. So I hope many of you will avail of those resources. So in closing, first of all, let me thank the CIA again. Let me thank all of the colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be participating in this discussion. I hope what I said is of some interest to you, and I hope that I have managed to establish in your minds the great opportunity for energy efficiency. India has already shown the benefits that energy efficiency can bring in its progress in recent years. And I think those benefits are only heightened and strengthened now by the great alignment between energy efficiency, economic recovery, job creation, and these issues that are even more pressing in 2020 than they ever were before. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our discussion in the following minutes. Thank you.